Engagers, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of using games and gamification in our daily lives, for example, to learn what we are teaching. And I am Rob Alvarez. I work at Ironhack, teach at IE Business School University, and so much more, and host this podcast. If you have an extra second, please go ahead and subscribe for free to our email list at professorgame.com/subscribe. Welcome, Engagers, to another episode of the Professor Game podcast, and we are with Milica today. But before we kick off, Milica, are you prepared to engage?
Of course, can't wait.
Let's do this because we have Milica Marjanovic. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Wow, I made it.
Well done. Well done. Most people don't get it right from the first point, but well done.
So she's a master psychologist and constructivist psychotherapist in education. She has 5 years of work experience in multinational companies in the role of HR consultant. She started her career in HR positions and focused in recruitment and selection, as well as professional assessment of candidates. She resulted this in specializing in assessing the development level and competencies and conducting assessment centers. And as a recruiter and later a consultant delivering career transition programs, she was able to collaborate and guide many candidates through their career change processes. Career transition programs, in particular, with personalized consulting support and intensive work due to process change and the new challenges that candidates faced. And you might be asking yourself, does she do games-based learning, experiential learning, Lego serious play, constructive methodologies, advisory work? Yes to all of the above. So Milica, is there anything that we are missing that you want to make sure that we put into that intro?
No, that's even more than you should say. I think with this audience, the biggest part of our focus will be my game-based learning experience, and super excited to share that with you.
Absolutely. So Milica, what would you say a typical, regular, normal day with you looks like, if that even exists?
Actually, thank you for adding this at the end. It's not a typical day. As an HR consultant in people development, I actually do a lot of different things, and my job has a lot of aspects. So I do a lot of game-based learning stuff. So I'm expert in our company for creating and delivering game-based solutions, but I still also work on other people development projects since we are a small HR consultancy firm. So I still do training delivery, and I still do those career transition projects that you mentioned in the beginning. But as I said, my days are mostly busy with creating game-based solutions. And lately, or in this past couple of weeks, we started creating the first Serbian leadership game. And that's how my days have been busy lately. So now I'm finding educational materials, so top quality content that we want to put in the lessons of our game. Then we're creating different practical elements, so different challenges within the game that will allow our players to practice those skills, let's say delegation or giving feedback. And of course, we are tying it all up into the storyline that is actually quite rooted into the Serbian folklore. So we are having a team of people with their leader, who is actually being played by the player of the game. And they're going on a mission to find and kill a vampire that is haunting a small town in the eastern Serbia.
Wow. So interesting.
So that's been something that I've been busy with, researching a lot about vampires. That wasn't actually my topic of interest, but I think it's going to be really, really fun and different from everything people have seen in leadership training. And I'm pretty excited to see how it ends up looking.
And we were discussing before we started recording why, the vampire is so important for you in Serbia. Can you give us a very quick background on that one?
Yeah, a short background. I don't know if your listeners know, but the word vampire actually origins from Serbian language. that in all the languages in the world, you have the root of the word vampire from Serbian. And it's been mentioned that there were some real vampires here in Serbia in the 17th century. There is also a record in Vienna from that period, from the monarchy period in Vienna, because part of Serbia was there. They have a written record from people coming to Serbia to search vampires and talk to people who were talking that there are vampires haunting their villages. So that's why this story is important to our folklore. Wow. And it's a worldwide known story. So it's going to be interesting for everybody. And it has that connection with our people.
So there you go. If you're ever using vampires as a theme, you can always go back to, looking at what Milica is doing. You can be looking into Serbian culture for sure. Very, very interesting stuff. For those of you who enjoy, vampires, I was also commenting that I did some college or university work on literature and vampires and movies back in the day. So, Milica, can you tell us, a story? Because, we've been discussing the story of vampires. I don't know if it has to do with vampires or not, but we would like to know the story of one of those times when, you hit one of those fail moments or those first attempts in learning, which of course are, they tend to be a keystone to future success as well. So we want to, sort of be there in that story with you, see what you learned from that, and of course, how you managed to escape that moment and, turn it around.
Well, the story I thought of mentioning was not actually connected to vampires, but now when you try to put it like this, maybe I can
be
start.
Anything else. Can be anything else.
Well, I thought of actually saying a story of one not so pleasant experience that I had with delivering a game-based solution. This is different than the games that we were first talking about. So this is a live game-based solution, Lego Serious Play workshops. That's something that I also do. And we were supposed to deliver a workshop to a group of salespeople from our client's company. And the goal of the workshop was to actually improve their approach to clients and to increase their sales. And we created a workshop that was following all the steps of Lego Serious Play methodology. We did everything we thought was perfect. And we started the workshop. In the beginning, everything looked great. But as the day progressed and as we kept going deeper and deeper into the topic, exploring the beliefs of people in the room and the knowledge that they have. And as the challenges of the play became more complex, we saw the anxiety in the room rising. We actually ended up having, by the end of the workshop, the atmosphere in the room was borderline hostile. So we had participants refusing to play, walking in and out of the room, and we barely made them to finish the workshop until the end to have the closing words. So when they...
Ouch.
Yeah, it was painful, I have to tell you. Me and my colleague actually co-facilitated the workshop, and we were devastated. We were so disappointed. I think for 5 minutes we just stared into each other, like barely being able to speak. But then after 3 breaths, we came back and we actually started dissecting the workshop step by step to see what went wrong. And then we actually figured out that the game became too complex for the player. So we actually didn't do the player research as well, that well. And we did the workshop that we made the play too complex for them to comprehend and to have some benefits from it. So we ended up actually changing our workshop, making it less complex, but still keeping the goal of the workshop at the end. And we also did the part of the discovery and the onboarding phases of the game. so we improved the introduction of the workshop. So we managed the expectations of participants much better. So we were able to bring them faster into the state of flow and to secure that they stay in that state because they knew better what's coming. And actually the thing that it was coming was less complex. So actually the workshop became a lot better. And we have the same effects, so the same output of the workshop that we wanted, but with much better play process and actually even better results because the people were not that frustrated and out of the flow state that they actually were in the first workshop.
That sounds fantastic. Is there any sort of small example of a thing that you say, oh, this thing we changed, it was too complex, and you sort of toned it down? Is there one thing that you can mention that could be in that direction?
Yeah, actually there is. So the Lego Serious Play methodology has 1 4-step core process and 7 different application techniques, or let's call them challenges in the play. And one of those challenges actually requires people to make connections between different models of Lego bricks that they made, to make some kind of a system of their thoughts and knowledge. And actually we understood that was the part that was too complex. They already set the stage. They put the models in relation to each other. And those connections were just too complex for them and they didn't serve the additional purpose. So we were able to continue with the workshop even without creating those connections. So we figured out that that's the part that was too complex. And we actually just discarded that one technique, that one challenge from the workshop. And that made everything better.
That makes a lot of sense. And it seems, I wanted to pinpoint to an example because sometimes when we hear these things like, oh, well, we simplified. And there you can see exactly like one small thing that can make a change and make everything so much better for example, a Lego Serious Play workshop. And of course, experience, is always coming there. And experience comes in the form of failure. And that's okay. As you can see, Milica is still conducting these workshops better than before. And every time I'm sure there are small or great improvements along the way. And absolutely, right?
Yeah. And I like to say that every mistake, if you know how to handle it, makes you better. So if we were trying to, blame it on the players, say that they weren't understanding the methodology or anything else, then we wouldn't improve. We would leave our workshop the same and we would say, okay, it's people's fault, it's the other people's fault. This is not the methodology for them. But we actually approached it from the other side. We discarded our ego and we were able to make it even better.
Absolutely. That's what we are always aiming for, making things better. And that's part of the iteration. And it's definitely something we should always be aiming at. So Milica, let's turn it around and go actually for a success story. One time you faced a significant challenge and you said, look, I'm going to solve it using some form of gamification, Lego Serious Play, some playfulness here and there. And you actually managed. We want to be there and see some of the success factors as well.
Well, this is actually not a singled out event. It's something that we incorporated and that we're doing now as a basis of previous experience. So as trainers, we actually figured out that not so rarely people end up leaving training and not implementing the skills and techniques that they've learned. So no matter how good the training was, not everybody will feel free to implement the new skills. And that's kind of logical. Change is hard and it takes practice to change, to learn something. And what we did is that here's where games come into action. We created something that we call blended solutions. So we still do the live training as we always did. And in our trainings, we use experiential learning methodology, as you mentioned in the beginning. So we design our trainings to give participants the opportunity to talk about their experiences, about their insights, and to learn new skills from us and to create new knowledge. And then we give them the game to play, the game that's connected to the learning material that they've passed through the training. And this gives them the opportunity to implement the newly learned skills, to practice and to form new patterns of behavior in a safe environment of game, while also receiving feedback on every decision that they make so they can improve their skills while practicing. And then this showed up to actually help them to facilitate the implementation of skills in the real world after the training. So that's how we create our trainings now for, let's say, all the live trainings that we have in our portfolio. We are connecting some game to give people the opportunity to implement new skills into their behavioral set before going out into the real world. And this makes it easier for them to change their behavior in the office later on.
Bringing the actual practical aspect into the training, right?
Yeah, in a safe environment. And in a fun environment of a game. And the games are designed like that. So they also have some bits and pieces of quality educational material. So they repeat what they've learned in the training in the other form of presentation. And then they practice everything in the simulation of the game. They receive feedback, they refine their skills, and then they go out in the world and use them.
Very, very interesting and a very good approach to actually doing your games-based solutions. And is there a time in which you can, is there a specific training that you did this for, maybe the first time, how it went, that you can tell us a quick story on that?
Yeah, we had a client that wanted to, let's say, train their employees in assertiveness. So we did a 6-hour live training of assertive communication. That's a training that we really like because it goes well with the name of our company, Assert International. So we did the live training. And after that, we gave our participants game on assertive communication called Christmas. They played a game for 3 weeks. They had a 3-week period, but actually they finished playing in the first couple of days. And then a month after that, we also had an implementation workshop with the people to check how the gameplay process went and how it helped them to easier implement the new skills in their everyday work. And the results were actually great. People were very satisfied with the program, and they actually, in the questionnaire that they filled, said that it helped them a lot to practice new skills before trying them out in the real world, not just in the office, but also with the people at home, with their family, with their wives especially. So we had a lot of examples like that.
That sounds fantastic. That's great. So talking about that, because you were talking about changing the way you do things, would you say that there is some sort of process, some sort of series of steps that you follow when you're creating these kinds of learning experiences?
Well, yes, depending on which methodology we use. With Lego Serious Play, it's actually a method for facilitation of communication, thinking, and decision-making processes. So it follows specific methodology. On the other hand, when we are creating these game simulations for teaching specific skills, then we use, so it's Game Learn's secret formula, a 3-part formula, because we also use their editor in creating our games. So we always look to have top quality and applicable content. And since we're a company of master psychologists, we know about research into soft skill training, and we actually have that top quality content. And then we use the editor to create simulations. And I've already explained the process of creating the storyline with the vampires in the beginning. So that's the process that we use. First, have the content that you want to teach to your players. Then figure out how are they going to practice those skills that you're going to teach them. Figure out what kind of feedback are you going to give them in those simulations, and then tie everything up with fun and interesting storyline that's going to be engaging to players.
That's absolutely great. Just a quick break before we continue. Are you enjoying this podcast? If you're listening through a podcasting app, please subscribe and rate us on the app. This will be of great help to reach more engagers so we can change the world together through gamification. So Milica, what would you say is, when implementing using gamification, games-based learning, would you say there is some sort of best practice, something that, most projects would at least benefit from doing? They would be better projects if they do this sort of recommendation.
Yeah, how we added value to Game Learn's portfolio, since we are Game Learn's distributors in this part of the world, we actually added the follow-up, the implementation sessions. So we leave our participants to have some time to use those skills in the real world. But after a month or a month and a half after finishing the program, we do the follow-up session. And we actually check with our players how have they been using the skills that they've learned through the game. What were some barriers in implementing those skills? How do they manage to overcome them? And what else can they do in order to better implement those skills? So I think that a follow-up meeting is very important for changing the behavior and actually facilitating the implementation of newly acquired skills. And also the efficiency measurements. So to measure the effects of your training solution, we use the Kirkpatrick model, and we are happy that GameLearn also uses it. But we try to go even to the fourth level with our clients when it's possible.
There you go. Very, very important. That follow-up, that is very, very important. And do you use some form of games-based learning for that follow-up, or is it a bit more, let's call it formal?
It's more a facilitation meeting, where we actually give people the word. We just ask them a couple of questions, and it's great because then they also hear each other's challenges and help each other in implementing new skills. So we make a community of players that later on help each other and point out when a certain skill can be used in the workplace.
That is a very important part of gamification, games-based learning, is the community that can be created as well. Social interactions, all these things help a lot as well.
Yeah. Oh, and the follow-up meeting and people talking about how they've passed certain challenges in the game. That's priceless. And also when we had our colleagues in-house testing GameLearn games, the talks within the office while they're playing, that's priceless. The learning that happens there when people ask each other, so how did you pass this? Why do you think this had to be done in the game? And they, let's say, repeat the feedback that they get in the game. And this actually helps them learn and acquire knowledge much faster and to retain it much longer.
Absolutely, for sure. And what would you say in that same sense? You gave us a fantastic recommendation. Is there somebody that comes to your mind, somebody you've, either admired or somebody that you would think, oh, this person I would like to listen to the answer, his or her answers to the questions on a podcast like Professor Game?
Well, actually, I had been a guest on one webinar that I've listened to one marvelous girl from Croatia doing some board games. But I also stumbled upon, while doing a research on game-based learning, I also stumbled upon one very, very interesting company creating game-based learning solutions. And since I already heard this person, I would really love to hear the founder of that company. I think his name is Mohamed Rida. People also know him by the name Mo Ash, and his solutions really seem very, very interesting. The company's name is The Catalyst. And maybe I haven't seen his name in your podcast, and I've actually looked through all your guests and everybody I found interesting, and I wanted to hear something from them. I already heard them in your podcast, and this is, I think, the only person I haven't heard of that I haven't heard them speak, and I would love to. So there's a lead for you.
Thank you very much. That is very kind. Using that search function to find everybody that you would like to listen to, and actually having a good experience and saying, well, they're here, so I can listen to them as well.
Yeah. Well, your podcast has helped me a lot in learning about game-based solutions. And the time that we met in Game Learning's webinar, I was so excited because both you and Professor Cap were somebody I've listened to and read about your work before going into this game-based learning practice. So I was really humbled to participate in a webinar by your side.
Thank you very much.
I'm really humbled to be here tonight as well.
Thank you very much. Those are very kind words, and I take them to heart. So thank you as well for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast and be sharing your experience with the engagers as well. And talking about sharing experiences, is there a book that you would recommend this audience, the audience of the engagers?
Well, I already said something. So I said that Professor Karl Kapp was my idol starting off with gamification and game-based learning. So definitely his book, Play to Learn. So the full title is Play to Learn Everything You Need to Know About Designing Effective Learning Games. That's something that helped me a lot in the beginning, gave me a lot of information to start off. So I think that's a very, very quality reading.
Absolutely fantastic book. Karl Kapp is definitely a top-notch writer and, guest and everything else that he does in the games-based learning and gamification space. So absolutely fantastic. And talking about the gamification space and games-based learning, what would you say in your case is your superpower? And remember, there's many heroes that fly, they all have the same superpower. It doesn't have to be unique. It's that thing that's, you do better at least than most other people.
Well, I would say when it comes to creating game-based solutions, my superpower is a childlike spirit. I will always be a child in my soul, but that's connected with profound knowledge of psychology. So I think that's my superpower, having a childlike spirit in the brain of a psychologist.
That sounds absolutely great. The mix sounds very, very fantastic. And
yeah, it's fun being in my head sometimes.
So talking about being a child and sometimes games are associated to childs. What would you say is your favorite game?
Yeah, well, I still play a lot of Risk, and that's something that I've played throughout my entire life. So those strategic games I like. Also card games. So from the early age, I've played card games, and that's something that I actually connect a lot to my family experiences. So as a family, we like to sit down and play cards. And lately I've been playing Dixit a lot. So I love the storytelling part of that game. And I think it actually helps me in figuring out stories for my game-based solutions.
It sounds great. And I used to love Risk, but playing other things, I don't know if Diplomacy was one of them. I don't know if I enjoyed it that much, but there's other games that as well incorporate the strategic part and have a lot less of, One of the things that I liked at that point, I was very, very young when I started playing, was that I could, play all night.
Yeah.
That was something I really liked. But now, being an adult, it's a little bit more difficult to find, time to play a full game of Risk. So there's other games like modern games right now that there's plenty of introducing that strategic element in shorter bursts, so to speak. You can play for an hour, 45 minutes, and still get all that same strategic element. So there's plenty to look at in there. But again, I have to confess, some people don't like it, but I am still a Risk lover. I just don't find the time to play it.
Yeah, it's also a social thing. I don't know. We used to play it, our friends. So my friends and I had some roommates here who loved it. So it's kind of a social thing, and it brings nostalgia. So it's always the same people who play Risk in my case. So it's kind of a hanging out thing for us. And I think it's going to remain like that at least until all of us get kids. Now we have one friend that has a kid, and for him it's hard to participate sometimes, but I think until that happens, we will play Risk.
Well, the kids will also start to grow a little bit, and after some time they can go to sleep as well, and you can still play
after they stop
Risk
eating
game.
the parts of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and again, you're relating this, it comes back to a conversation of, also introducing the social element into the learning. Here, one of the things that you definitely relate to is that nostalgia and that social element that you associate with a specific game. So we're seeing this live, engagers, how, nostalgia and social interactions can help us be engaged with something.
Of course.
So, Milica, thank you again very much for participating with us today. Are there any final pieces of advice you want to leave us with? Any, final words? Please, of course, do let us know where we can find more about your work and the work that you're doing before we say that it's game over.
Well, the final word of advice for everybody is to try out the game-based solutions, but do your research and look for the great ones, because the first experience usually makes it or breaks it. And when you try the right one, you will be hooked. And I think that's it from me. Of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect. I will love to share my experience. So whatever questions you might have, just drop them on my LinkedIn account and I will make sure to answer to them.
That sounds fantastic. So thank you once again very much for sharing all this time. If you can't, Milica, it's written Milica. That's how you'll find it in the Professor Game page. You'll find there all of the links, everything that we've discussed. You'll have a summary right there of especially all the links that you will have. All of the advice, you'll find it there as well. So thanks again, Milica, for being with us, for sharing your knowledge, your experience. However, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over. Hey, engagers, thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast, and I hope you enjoyed our interview with Milica. And I have a question for you. Do you have a question that you would like to ask future guests? Anything that's on your mind, any doubts, any insecurities as well that you would like to ask about, to see how they overcame it, any game strategies you want to run through our guests? I don't know. Any questions that you have for guests, anything that you want, you can go to professorgame.com/question to ask that burning question that you have. And if it is selected, it will come up in a future episode and you will get your answer live in an episode of Professor Game Podcast. And remember, before you go on to your next mission, remember to subscribe or follow absolutely for free using your favorite podcast app so that you can listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.